In the beginning, God may have created the heavens and the earth, but not even the Bible is daring enough to claim exactly how it happened. That's why there are two distinct creation stories at the beginning of Genesis, and neither one was ever meant to give a scientific account of how creation happened. Instead, each one offers its own poetic images describing the Creator, creation, and why human beings are the way we are.
Now, if we think of the Bible as a divine product, it's coming from God in some fairly direct or indirect way, if we think of the Bible as a divine product, then the Genesis stories of creation are God's stories of creation. And if they are God's stories of creation, then they can't possibly be wrong. And if you go very far down that road, you may find yourself becoming involved with creation science or scientific creationism or school board squabbles in various parts of the country about whether Genesis should be taught alongside of evolution in high school biology courses. The only reason you would ever think of doing that is if you were thinking that the Genesis stories of creation are God's stories of creation. That's why they can't be wrong. If, on the other hand, you see the Bible as a human product, then the Genesis stories of creation are ancient Israel's stories of creation. And we realize that ancient Israel, like virtually every culture known to us, had its stories of creation. And if we ask, what are the chances that ancient Israel's stories of creation might contain scientifically accurate information? The answer would be about zip. And if they did, it would be purely random, sheer coincidence. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the Genesis stories of creation are profoundly true. But I think they're profoundly true as metaphorical narratives, as symbolic narratives, not as reports of how it really happened.
Well, there are two creation stories in Genesis which in fact contradict each other, which is wonderful. It shows that no one was there. Shouldn't take any of them literally. They all have insight about wisdom, however.
In Genesis 1, the rhythmic unfolding of creation is a step-by-step counter-response to the theology of their captors.
In a world where the surrounding cultures worship the sun, moon, and stars as gods, to claim that your God has created the sun, moon, and stars was a not-so-veiled theological one-upsmanship.
Exiled in Babylon and fighting despair at their situation, the Jewish authors of this propaganda piece were saying, in essence, that our God is better than your God.
Not only were these other gods cast as the creations of the God of the Hebrews, but they were also gutted of their basic functions. The sun, for instance, doesn't actually provide light. Light has already been around for 3 days before the sun comes to the scene. This, of course, also throws a wrench into the literal interpretation of 24-hour days. We've already had 3 days pass, and the sun hasn't even been created yet.
Another one of the clear conflicts between the two Genesis stories is in the creation of human beings. In Genesis 1, human beings are created male and female at the same time. The story of woman being created from man, with all of its patriarchal implications, is a story element used in Genesis 2.
Genesis chapter 1, it's marvelous poetry. When in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. And then we start getting, and on day 1 and day 2, and it was good, and it was good. And it's all very clean, and it's very neat. And you get the animals, and then you get male and female created he, him. Male and female created he, them. Man and woman together, told to be fruitful and multiply. Splendid. Then you get to Genesis 2 and Genesis 3, and it gets a little bit more messy. Suddenly you find out, here's the human being created, but the animals are created later. And then Eve, the woman, is created even after the animals. What's going on here? We seem to have a discrepancy. The names of God are different. The style is different. The cadence is different. In effect, we've got two creation narratives. Is this a problem? Well, it's only a problem if you think there has to be only one creation narrative, if the world can be imaged only in one way.
Which many people feel is the only way to do.
Oh, how narrow.
Yeah.
In the ancient world, in fact, up until the Enlightenment, people looked at this as one continuous narrative. And you can read it that way. In terms of literary criticism, you can read it as a continuous narrative. You can say chapter 1 is foreshadowing what happens in chapter 2. Fine. I like the idea that there are different creation narratives. I like the idea of imaging the cosmos in different ways. I actually hold a joint appointment at Vanderbilt at the Blair College of Music, and I teach a course on the Bible and music with a musicologist. And one of the exercises we give our students, both divinity students and music students, is to say, how do you hear the idea of creating order out of chaos? Well, Genesis chapter 1 was set by Haydn, it was set by Aaron Copland, it was set by Duke Ellington. They're very different, and they're all right. So why not tell the story of creation in different ways? Because the important thing about the biblical materials, particularly in Genesis 1 through 11, this prehistorical dream time that we have, is not the details. Now we have to wonder about, where were the dinosaurs and whatnot.
The unicorn.
The unicorn, and did Adam and Eve know Fred and Wilma? But the general points that are trying to be made here. Let's talk about the order of the universe, the idea that creation is good. And then once we know that God saw that everything was good, and then we find out for the first time when God says something is not good, lo tov in Hebrew, not good. When God says it's not good for the human being to be alone, I'll make a helper. And then Adam gets to choose his own helper, and it's not the animals. What does that tell us about human nature? What does that tell us about partnership? Human to human, human to animal, human to God.
And the two stories portray God so differently. I mean, there's a lot of humor in the second Genesis story, especially when Adam says, I'm so lonely, and God says, well, here's the aardvark. Adam has to say, that's not really what I had in mind.
Right, and in fact, God recognizes that the human being is alone, says, I'll create a helper fit for him. And then when you ask most people what then happens, they say, well, so Adam gets put to sleep, and then you have Eve. No. So you have the creation of the animals, and the animals are paraded in front of Adam. And yes, Adam does look at the aardvark and think, absolutely no way. Sheep, possible. Dog, possible. Minor bird, no. Right? But the helper is not found fit for him. So who then is that individual who might complete Adam? There's humor here as well in terms of Adam falling asleep and then God taking from Adam's, the Hebrew is tselem, side, rib, if you will, because it's the reverse of a normal birth process. Instead of Eve giving birth to Adam, here it's Adam giving birth to Eve, but in a kind of 1950s way, so Adam is asleep through the entire process, right?
Ooh, a baby.
Right, ooh, a baby, with God serving his midwife. And I think that's a very nice confusion of gender roles.
So the two stories in Genesis come at creation from very different perspectives and motives. The orders of events are different. The feel and style are different. Their points are even different. But they were both important enough to the Jewish sense of identity to be included in the Bible.
For many, not seeing that there are two separate stories is simply a matter of having not read the stories since they were kids. But for some Christians, including those who promote the teaching of creation science or intelligent design in our public schools, the idea of an inerrant Bible is so important that they systematically ignore the obvious differences in the text in order to promote their literal beliefs. What is at issue is no less than the way people think, who controls our schools, and who controls our culture.
If you read the Bible metaphorically, the meanings open up and go deeper than simple literal interpretations allow. Unbending readings of the text have led to the Bible being misused to endorse all kinds of social ills, from slavery to war to the subjugation of women. But if you read the text in a way that is alert to the meanings that transcend the literal, you pave the way for deeper understandings.